I think the advent of AI and how AI is moving immensely fast and how it's going to affect not only day-to-day life, but also day-to-day business, the future of work, and how we actually look at developing applications, implementing applications, and all kinds of systems that help run our company.
John Comacchio is the CIO at Teknion. With over 4 decades in tech, he's led enterprise transformations at Teknion, principal in the e-integration practice at KPMG Consulting, ran US Interactive's Toronto office, and was the IT officer at Nissan Canada. He lends his expertise to a diverse range of industry and business advisory boards. To say he's seen every wave of enterprise tech change would be an understatement.
The big aha early on in our AI journey was governance. Everyone realized that any intellectual property, any private information, they were jeopardizing our business.
Welcome to Espresso Enterprise, and today we are joined by John Comacchio, who is the CIO of Teknion. He's a seasoned executive who knows what it really takes to move the needle in enterprise IT. Maybe, John, you can start off by giving us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Great to talk to you today, Sumit. So my name is John Comacchio, as you mentioned. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Teknion Corporation. We are a high-end design, engineer, and manufacturer of office furniture. We're a Canadian-based company with an international footprint. So I'm responsible for all technology worldwide for Teknion and all of its various companies around the world.
Awesome. So let's get right into it.
Sure.
So, John, as a CIO in this beautiful era of AI, what keeps you up at night?
Certainly, cybersecurity always keeps me up at night because that's we can't start a podcast without saying that, which is the truth, right? In its evolution. But I think the advent of AI and how AI is moving immensely fast and how it's going to affect not only day-to-day life, but also day-to-day business, the future of work, and how we actually look at developing applications, implementing applications, and all kinds of systems that help run our company.
And from the perspective of the board and your annual goals as a company, is there a certain AI direction you feel like you need to implement in the next little bit?
Well, if you look at like we develop systems, technology, and projects around business value and how to optimize business value from technology. So if you look at whether it's revenue growth, customer experience, a better customer experience, optimization, efficiency, they're all tied to those objectives. And AI really has a promise to help all of that. So from a board perspective, we look at it, how could AI help us with those objectives? How do we stay on point with those objectives? Because we just can't run rapidly through an AI implementation as an experiment. I think we have to tie it all to that. And that's really how we work.
Okay. And if I were to ask you, what is your top AI priority in the next 12 months as a CIO?
So I think it's back to that value realization. So as we look at the AI opportunities based on the objectives I mentioned, and with the business problem first, how can AI help us? So we've got set objectives, set business problems that we're trying to solve and/or improve our business, and how can I layer AI into that? And so that's really what we're trying to do right now, and do capability planning. Like, are we capable of doing it? Is the organization ready, et cetera? So I think there's a lot of opportunity to look at the immense field of AI and actually do something interesting in any one of those areas.
Okay, and when we talk to a lot of CIOs when it comes to implementing AI, they usually first go with some low-hanging fruit to get like a few quick wins. Have you guys discovered any of those yet?
Absolutely. So I think the easiest way we all know is if you have SaaS apps and or large applications to try to find the embedded app, the embedded AI and availability, understand it, and implement it. And we've been doing that. So the embedded AI is a quick win to get something in that's controlled, and the large language model is trained, it understands the data, etc. So we've done a lot of that. And we're a Google shop, so we use Google Workspace, Enterprise Workspace for our platform. So we implemented Gemini at the beginning of this year, embedded in Workspace, and also the Gemini app, which is highly used for deep research as well. So I think that has been the process of getting people understanding it. People have been playing with it at home. But I think when it's right in your front yard, and in the embedded side, you see a lot of value, and you start to get a bit more comfortable with its actualization of value.
Yeah. Before I go deeper into it, you did mention a point that people play with it at home, right? And when you are a CIO of such a big organization, right? People are going to put a lot of data in ChatGPT and other tools, right? Is that a concern for you guys?
Absolutely. So, like the big aha early on in our AI journey was governance, right? 18 months ago, we set out an AI governance policy around confidentiality, personal identifiable information, et cetera, and the rights and wrongs. We don't want to be a closed shop. I don't want to shut down access to ChatGPT because it has a lot of value. But we implemented Gemini, and we also implemented Copilot at the same time with the guardrails and the policies, and everyone has to read the policies and sign them off annually. And I know that sounds bureaucratic, but I think everyone realized that any intellectual property, any private information, they were jeopardizing our business if they did that. So I think, sort of scaring them in that sense in the right direction. And then I think they started thinking about their use of ChatGPT at home, how much information they were putting in that might have been private. So I think it's important. I have a GRC department within my world, so I think we understand policy a lot. But I think the AI one caught us off guard, and then of course tied to that is the ethical AI part of it as well, because we want to be an ethical company. We want to make sure that we use the right AI with the right guardrails, and and it's fair in its wording. But I think that was the real key, and I think we quelled that issue, and by not blocking free stuff, even Anthropic free, right? By not blocking it, you still are an open shop, but people have a lot more intelligence around what they can and can't do, should and shouldn't do. So.
So out of all the tools that you mentioned, right? Like you guys implement Gemini and Copilot, but there's also ChatGPT people use and Anthropic as well. Have you seen one of them have more usage by any means than the other? Is there?
Yeah, I would say, today, July 2nd, 2025,
Yeah. Yeah.
the Gemini by far
Wow.
is the best. And I say that tongue in cheek, but I find it the best. I think many people in our organization do. The deep research is constantly getting better.
Okay.
And I think the fact that we're embedded,
I
tools are
see.
released every day with the embedded parts. So now I can
I see.
search my Google Docs, et cetera. So ease of use became it.
I see.
I think we're quickly walking away from let me drag that file into the ChatGPT box, right? Having
I
it
see.
touch. So I think the key with anything is if it's embedded. But I also do think the large language model and what I get from the AI today
Yeah.
is the best. And I'm looking forward to everyone leapfrogging everybody, Sumit, because this business is all about leapfrogging, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you? Okay, that's great. And now that you see, like, you mentioned deep research is one of the ways your company uses it. I'm sure there are others as well. How do you measure ROI when it comes to these tools?
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, we've been looking for a quantifiable way to do it. So you get the efficiency stuff, like I bought myself an hour a week, 2 hours a week. It's not that I'm returning money, right? But I am getting through my backlog more often. Maybe I don't have to hire that second result. Maybe I don't have to hire that consulting company for some
Yeah.
simple roof, which I was looking
Yeah.
for. I apologize to all my consulting friends, right? But we'll
Hey,
take care.
consulting companies always find a way.
Yes, exactly, right?
Yeah.
But I think the qualitative parts I think are most interesting. I think what's happening is people are finding qualitative and demonstrating qualitative advancements in their job and their learnings as well, right? Because when it's sort of readily available to you, you didn't slug through all the effort of getting it and you want to move on. You've got some time to actually think deeper, right? And I think that's been very successful. And also, I think writing, I hate to say it, but, I think a lot of people have lost that skill of writing, cursive writing, et cetera.
Yeah.
And the Gemini and these other tools can help you sort of smooth out, that email. Especially, technically, we need to smooth out emails for uninformed people, right?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah. Yeah.
and by doing that, like, when your DevOps guy can actually send an email that's legible to the average person, that's a phenomenal thing. And a Gemini or Copilot helps them with that, I'm fine with that. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting because I think Gemini did not have the best launch last year, right? But it definitely seems to have picked up a lot of steam in the last 3 or 4 months,
yeah,
right?
I would
Again,
agree.
today being
Oh,
July 2nd, 2025, who knows what the next
exactly,
model holds, right?
exactly.
Uh, yeah, great. So I guess now that like you have adopted some AI tools and you are thinking of adopting more, um, is there any sort of infrastructure layer you need to have as a company to implement these successfully, like an infrastructure or data layer?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the real key for us would be in any company really is how do we put AI, large language model kind of AI into our core systems? Because we all have a mix of legacy systems, which are very isolated in their way. We have a mix of new SaaS systems and everything else that's around there. So what do we need, right? Do we need a lake house, right? Like we have very, very good data. We're very happy with our data. We've done a good job of creating that source of truth. I always joke around it's a 23-year overnight success, so we can't really worry too much about how long it takes. But, do we need that lake host? Do we need some special infrastructure? And do we need to isolate it from, let's say, core systems, so let them run and have the large language model attacking data that we can label properly? And I think the labeling of that data is going to be key. No different than back when the websites became the thing and everyone had to learn to meta tag. This is no different than that. And we cannot rely on how our data is labeled within different databases. So I think that infrastructure is important. I think scalable cloud infrastructure, you've got to have that compute that can scale. You have to have obviously the access to GPUs and TPUs. You cannot underestimate that. And it's a big lineup to get that, but you've got to get on earlier, as we've done, than later. Certainly, integration tools. I mean, we use a strong API cloud, but do we have the right resources, to do anything other than core systems and to actually, do an MCP, right? And get and tie into those actual data structures. So that's something we're looking at very strongly, how we do that. And of course, the robust cybersecurity, Sumit. I mean, there's all kinds of ways now to poison our data, et cetera. So it's another threat area that we have to think differently about. And so I think the cybersecurity part and its continuous governance. We are an international company, so I have to worry about Canada, but I also have to worry about the governance in every country that we do business in and that we have people and plants in, right? So that also is another area that we need some technology. We're using a technology around compliance to help us with that, and just spider through our data and help us, give us that report card, that red or green report card as well. So one of those little subsets that you don't think about in that part. But I would also say the the skill set, like how do we bring people up to do this? The revelation that you need an AI ops department that augments your DevOps department, that augments your DevSecOps department, and someone's got to be looking at the models and how are they training, how are they running. Those are other new skill sets that we have to start looking at. So how do we do that? How do we build that? How do we buy that? So
Yeah, okay. So you brought up a very good point, which is you talked about training your own models, right? And you talked a lot about data. So there's obviously the build versus buy, right?
right,
So right now, when you talked about Gemini, I'm guessing it's mostly buy, right?
yes,
You're not
correct,
building yet, right?
right.
So, but I'm assuming you do have plans to train and build.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's part of our planning, and part of that planning is just not to create a POC to
Okay.
do it. It's how do we tie it back to a business value realization,
Okay.
and also tie it into what optimized operating model do I need and does the business need, to at least kick off one of these because it's going to change the way we
Yeah.
think, the way we actually run our systems. and it could have a great hit on technical debt. I
Yeah,
could create technical debt without even touching it, right?
yeah, yeah. Of course, because like if you're hiding behind the AI layer, like technical debt doesn't even matter at that point in a way, right? If the AI can figure out what the bug is, right?
Exactly, exactly,
Yeah,
and the demand for, access to technical debt databases, reports, screens, etcetera, all of a sudden could go away. Like,
yeah,
source it yourself through the LLM, right? And all of a sudden, and not that we're gonna extend technical debt's life cycle, but if it's red, yellow, green, I could sit at yellow for a long time,
yeah.
while I get to green with piece by piece, because again, it's a big job to eliminate technical debt, and we're always circulating on that. But anyway, I think it's a real opportunity for CIOs as well as for the business to get value out of what they already have.
Yeah, that brings a good point about, if you were to build, you said it would be a lot around business value, right?
Right.
And business value is usually, displayed through some sort of business apps you build, be it internal or external, right?
Right.
So, do you think a lot of future business value will be done through business apps that are created through LLM? Is that with LLM or any model that's in the backend? Do you see that as the future?
I see that it's certainly as the near term future, right?
Okay.
Because we were still looking at the existing systems and applications we have, even if they're modern SaaS apps like Salesforce,
Yeah.
right? They're always being interrogated, right? There's
Yeah.
always a question asked, and we're a business to business company. We do
Yeah.
large projects, so the amount of customer expectation and customer service is,
Yeah.
where's this, where's that? Can I replace this?
Yes.
How's this? When's this coming? That goes through customer service reps. If there could
Yes.
be some self-serve through large language models, and then
Yes.
save the customer service rep for the big decisions, the big
Yes.
questions, right? You can interrogate a whole bunch of information and make a B2B decision with
Yes.
a question that you can
Yes.
talk to us. I think that really is a huge opportunity for business to business.
That makes a lot of sense. But that does bring up the point you raised earlier, which is cybersecurity, which in this AI age
Yes.
we can call it safety, right? And having guardrails around it. How do you think of that?
Well, I think basically when you look at zero trust and you look at web access firewalls, every piece of data, every system you have has to be in a zero trust platform, has to go through a web access firewall for the secondary, tertiary protection. And I think you in the threat hunting is extremely important, and different kind of threat hunting. And when you think about the threat hunting we're doing today in advance, that has to be different. And I also think you need to be able to have your AI accessible data isolated back into the data lake or something of that
I
nature.
see.
And that
Makes
needs to
sense.
be scanned on a daily basis, multiple times a day, because threats happened 3 months ago that we only become aware in 2 minutes from now, right?
Yeah,
So I think you have to constantly refresh that so that data doesn't get poisoned, right?
that
And I
makes
think
sense.
that's the biggest concern I have, and maybe poison is not the right term, but certainly what I can think of, how you can damage people's data easily, and people rely on the AI and they think it's true when the answer
Yeah.
comes back, right?
Yeah, because like going back to the customer service example you're talking about, right? They say customers start asking questions about their order or like, possible future order or about like, a piece of item you have, right? Um how do you guardrail that like, it's not able to it's not returning some PII of some other customer that's in the same data lake?
Right, absolutely. So a couple ways. One is that everything is tied to a customer and an order, and our data looks at that way. So with authentication, and by back to like coming in through SSO, coming in, be authenticated in our system of who you are, and you have to have that identity piece, and then also you have to have the order piece, and possibly depending on if it's a top secret order, we might have to implement CAM, right? At that point as well to get a higher level of security for certain people. So I think that's one part of the guardrail. I think the other part is really how the data is held and portrayed, and what's the off ramp for you should talk to a customer service rep. So how do we go and say this could be too important? This could involve PII. And there's that infamous, confidential, unclassified information. What is confidential, unclassified information? Well, basically everything that's not classified, right? So when we get a sense of what that is, maybe you need to off ramp. And AI calls the customer service rep, and then they begin the deduction of what to share, what not to share. I think that's another element that we've been thinking a lot about. Right? It's not just
That makes
strictly
sense.
eliminating talking to a person. It is how can AI augment when you talk to a person, and
Yeah,
and and how that person can interpret the governance rule around
that's
PII
interesting.
and
So it's the
confidential.
opposite.
Yes,
Instead of a customer service agent using AI, it could be the AI dealing with the customer. But if AI needs more information, they could ask a L2, L3 human that would
exactly.
give them approval for the data.
Exactly. With the guardrails of this seems a bit
Yeah,
too confidential. Maybe I should get a second opinion. It's back to the
makes
doctor
sense.
thing, right? And it's an interesting thought, but when you look at dealing with B2B clients, you have a lot of confidential
Makes
information.
sense.
And including in our case, the buildings we're filling, right? They're not necessarily public knowledge, right? So it provides interesting opportunity with the off ramp, I think.
It is because human being the last arbitrator is much safer
Yes.
than AI being the last arbitrator,
Yes.
right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. Um, so going back to implementing AI, do you think you talked a little bit about how you have to have your data very clean in data lakes,
Yes. Yeah.
give the AI access to it, but is there anything else that comes to mind that maybe is not as straightforward, but it's kind of unsexy and ugly, but you have to do it before implementing AI solutions?
Yeah. I think you have the governance of data, the classification of data. We all have data classifications, but when we started looking into our data classifications around a certain NIST certification, you realize you have to go a lot deeper. So what really is private? What really is classified correctly? So I think that data maturity includes data classification maturity and an actual relook at the data that we're sharing, and can it be shared in conjunction with a question, or does it have to go to that off ramp we talked about? So I think that's one part, and I think the evolving governance that's going to have to happen with all of us. I mean, we're not a regulated company like a bank or a healthcare company, et cetera. So we all have to now learn to become regulated companies, because all these governance issues and privacy issues and data issues are going to be regulated by either governments that we see with the EU GDPR, with Canada's AI and Data Act that hopefully eventually will come out soon. The U.S. government, NIST 800-053 certification for cybersecurity. That's all governance. So I think that part is going to be big. And having a GRC department within my department, I'd like to say it was brilliant. It was not clairvoyant. I just needed to get more governance in, so I
Yeah,
created it. But now
yeah,
it's almost a necessity to grow it,
makes
and
sense.
to be in my backyard where I can look at all the data, look at the applications, and look at how the objectives are flying around. So
Yeah, that's interesting because GRC was definitely up and coming, like
right.
in the last couple of years, but now I think with AI, it's an absolute must if
Yes.
you want AI to have access to your data,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And like a CIO being at the pivot of that, I think is very smart. And I
Yeah,
say that just because we are the data holders, right?
yeah,
And so we aren't the data owners, but if we can convince the data owners that we have to hold it this way, and this needs an off ramp, and these are the reasons why, I think our input is valuable in that area.
So then, okay, so you guys can do that as a part of your governance team, right? But say a third party system or even one of your existing vendors, right, comes in, be it your ERP system, right, or your finance system, and they need access to your data, right, because they have an embedded AI model, right? How do you ensure the right governance and compliance and making sure they don't, um, you know, return any PII or give anything more than necessary? Yeah. How do you do that with a third party system?
Yeah, so I think the first part is that we probably don't include PII just because we don't know how it's going to work, right? And
Yeah.
we're going to have to figure out a way to vet that system. Like right now, we have a cybersecurity checklist for any application or hardware we buy.
Yeah.
We're going to have an AI checklist on how it's going to actually consume and leverage our data, how it's going to train this large language model, and how it's going to not train certain data and get a validation that if we do have PII, because it's necessary for that agent, for example, within that embedded software, that PII is not training the large language model. So I think we have to one more further level of compliance that we have to get verification from those applications, and we've been looking at that. We've been creating a playbook on, well, what would we ask? Like, here's our cybersecurity checklist. Let's turn it into data. And
Yeah.
what we ask the same questions, right? Does your system do this? The only change is they're evolving their model every day. How do
Yeah.
we keep on top of that, or what do we expect them to give us? And I think we have to start demanding this up front and
Yes.
not just accepting that this is going to happen. And I think when I look at the guardrailed applications today that are enterprise based, be it Copilot, Gemini, et cetera, they state very clearly that your data is not being used to train the large language model. So that kind of statement has to come from every application, and it has to be auditable as well. And I would want a third party sign off on a regular
Yeah,
basis
makes sense.
too,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, but have you seen any of those instances where you've seen like one employee getting access to information that they're not supposed to while using one of these agents? Have you seen any of them in your company?
Not yet,
Okay.
but I'm sure we will submit.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure we will, right? Because if you
Yeah.
look at even the way, like embedded AI will summarize a document, and then that document is sent, and if that document it has PII that was allowed by that individual to be accessed, but not
Yeah.
allowed by me, that they sent me that document, that's a
Yeah.
problem. Right there, there could be a very live thing happening as we speak right now that I'm unaware of in embedded AI. So I think when you get into application data, how manufacturing, the efficiency of machines, work centers, shipments and logistics, all of a sudden that stuff could be spread pretty deep without knowing. So we've got to find a way to understand that. But I think training of the employees is going to be important, upskilling their awareness of all this. Because I think only I walk in the building worried about that every day. So
Yeah. So this is a question we ask all our podcast guests. Um, as a CIO, what do you think the IT department will look like in the next 5 years?
So, I think a lot about this because I wake up every morning thinking about yesterday, which is the technical debt, and am I doing a good job at it? Today, is everything up and running? Is the business running effectively with all the systems that we run today? And are we getting value out of tomorrow's applications that we're working on right now in all our projects? So I think about that. Then I think about 5 years from now that, frankly, all the digital skills need to be transferred to the departments, because there's no reason for us to be in the middle. And we've been doing that with SaaS apps over the past 8 years. When we have a SaaS app, after 18 months of managing it, integrating it, we pass the digital skills off to them, including the fact that they have to clearly drive any upgrades to that cloud and involve us. So as we keep going, it should be inherent in their application. And we should be the owners of the data, the holders of the data, the holders of the API infrastructure, the cybersecurity holders, and the governance holders. So really, we become air traffic controllers in a lot of ways. And we are also the ethical voice of everything that's going on and the directional voice. So I think, the days of, come to me to write applications, that with low code, no code, that's already going away, and I'm happy to do that. With LLMs that can actually target legacy systems, I don't need to give you any data. As long as you have access, and we do that through our access system, including our PAN system, because of high-level security, you can just ask your questions of multiple databases and get the answers tied to a customer and order or whatever else. So that's where I think we're going, and I think we're in a very good spot to be that person. And if you haven't started, doing that as a CIO, having started trusting the departments, transferring those digital skills, and having them have full ownership and responsibility of their data and how they use their systems. And we coming to us around integrations, and we facilitating the data owners, for, oh, you want this, why do I want that? And I think, I've always been very, very conscientious about never giving data from another department to another department. All my career, I've gotten the owners involved, and they would first say, "Why are you asking me? Why do you want this information?" And now it's a business discussion. So I think that's where it's going to go, and I think the amount of people we're going to have are going to be extremely highly skilled, and I think that the data part is going to be there. I think the AI ops or whatever it's going to be called then will be there. Someone still has to understand the full infrastructure operations. As far as technology and infrastructure, we'll just be buying power by the hour, which we do today, but we still get stuck with, creating some of our own virtual private clouds because of the limitations of our legacy databases and the compute required at that point as well. So that's kind of my thought. I'd be curious to see what you think about my thought.
I I just ask questions. I don't but I do want to ask a follow-up questions to
Sure, yeah.
this, which is you did say there will be high skilled. There will be the people you have will be higher skilled, correct?
Yeah.
So that brings up a good point of, okay, that means some of the existing jobs
Yes.
will not be there, right? Will not exist even in a couple of years. So which one of those roles come to mind that you think will no longer exist, so the existing people have to upskill themselves into a more relevant role?
Right, right. So if you think of day-to-day development work, um, has been slowly moving away. If just with data analytics systems, right? And that type of work is gone, right? And I think if you translate that into an adjunct development to a system, another operating model, some more reporting, some more analytics. I mean, all that kind of stuff will go away. I think managing the infrastructure as we manage it today, which we have to manage cloud, private cloud, public cloud, SaaS apps. I think that all will go away and it'll be managed by the clouds themselves. So their upskill will go to work at those jobs. So I've been doing this, Sumit, for 45 years, and I go from the day one of the mainframe, to the first day that guy back here,
Yeah.
1981, released the IBM PC,
Okay.
joined us. How everything was changing,
Yeah.
and then then client server, and then web, and then cloud. Goes on, right? And jobs went away, but new jobs got created. Yet the
Yes.
fundamental skill set of understanding compute, understanding data, understanding integration, and understanding efficiency and effectiveness of how we're processing, all those will still stay as a structure. And the key
Yeah.
is, how do you upskill people who are doing that, but those titles aren't there the way they were, right? I mean, every data scientist is using Python. They
Yeah.
don't need a developer, right?
That's
So
true.
that tells you a lot right there. So
Okay, so let me try to get some of these titles from your answer. So you said people who do reports, people who generate reports, people who do analytics. So these would be mostly business
right.
analysts, data analysts, right?
Yeah.
And then people who manage SaaS systems. These would be more your sysadmin, network admin, and like your admin for like your CRM system or like your ERP system. These are the kind of roles you're referring to. Is that fair to
Yeah,
say?
I think in general they are,
Yeah.
and yet their skill set's still required, right? But not
Yeah.
necessarily by everyday companies. Maybe they
Yeah.
end up with the actual providers, right?
See.
In a higher level. I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at the transition back in the '80s when people were outsourcing,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I outsourced control of your IBM mainframe to IBM, to
Yeah.
companies like CGI, HP, etc. I mean, all of a sudden those skill sets were gone from your company, but they grew enormously
Makes
within those
sense.
outsourcing companies. The same thing's going to happen here. I just
Makes
think
sense.
as an individual, like you have to be a lifelong learner. You have to understand where your career is going and what vector you want to take in your career. And you have to keep your critical thinking skills alive, because I think critical thinking about what you're doing and how you're doing it can tell you that, you know what, I should be doing something else and this should be automated. Like if you can tell yourself we should automate this, or this should be done by an AI agent at this point in time, right? Because I look at the advent of digital labor, that you should be looking at your job going, will digital labor help me do my job? If it will, what other job can I do while digital labor is helping me do this? And I think that's what every young person has to think about, every person in those roles. What's next for my role? And I think that's the key. Like, I think you can't, if I look at Silicon Valley right now, the average dev is not necessarily having a great time. The super devs, whatever that means, the guys working on AI, they're offering them enormous amounts of money, but they're doing
Yeah.
different jobs,
Yeah.
right? And I think that critical thinking part is what you have to do as an employee. I mean, my job has evolved in the past 45 years. The operating model of my department, I've constantly made it evolutionary. And I think if you're looking at your operating model and you're reminding yourself of 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, then you have to rethink what you're looking at, right? Because if you're not evolving that operating model, and then ties to yourself as well, what should you be doing? So,
I think that was a very interesting point, and I'd never heard of this perspective before. But you mentioned the skills, for example, the customer service skill was a self-serve you were talking about earlier. That role may move from inside the company to the vendor itself, and that
well,
makes sense because the AI is with the vendor, so it makes sense that the decision making and the logic, it stays with the vendors, like, embedded AI rather than within your own company. So yeah, that's a very interesting perspective.
yeah,
Okay, yeah.
it's good. Oh, that's good. Just as an adjunct, you have to think also about what you want in your budget, right? Do I need this skill in my budget, right?
Um, all right. One last question. So
Sure.
in this AI age or upcoming AI age, what are the three qualities you need as a CIO to be successful?
I think, from a leadership perspective, you have to be able to look forward and anticipate. I think that's one for the leadership. I think critical thinking is very, very clear as a requirement. And you have to be a good storyteller. And I say that as a third one because if you can't explain what you would like to do 3, 6, 12, 18 months from now, you will never get traction, right? And that storytelling part is not to pretend to tell a story. It's I see this vision, I see this technology, I related to a technology 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, how it's advancing, how we can advance, how can it help our company, and be the advocate for that, and just constantly, bring that to bear. And sit at the executive table, like I sit at the executive table, and I have for all of my CIO jobs. So you're at the table, understanding the strategy of the business. But I think that critical thinking part to really being aligned with your peers and bringing that thought processes forward and doing that storytelling to help them understand how this can impact them in a good way. And that's just really spending a lot of time understanding and constantly learning. And when we first looked at AI and you start looking at it, then all of a sudden this is just data. It's put in an unstructured data format that all of a sudden gets structured based on your question. And you go, wow, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's really brilliant. And then we sort of deduce it the way you see it, and then take that deduction and make it apply to your company. But I think those are very, very key, Sumit. I really think it's key.
Okay, John, this was great. Thanks a lot for your time and sharing so many key details that one might miss in this fast-moving AI age. Right, things are moving very fast. So we appreciate your time and thanks a lot for being here.